June 18th, 2020, for those in the future that will be watching this. I'm Teddy Pins, and here with Village Real Estate and Rebecca Cooper on the mastery of net sheets. And so Rebecca is one of the most accomplished agents with respect especially to her education. She has pursued an enormous amount of continuing education, and we're very thankful to have you here today presenting on net sheets and some of the templates we use. So let's give her the old Zoom, the Zoom claps. That is sign language for clapping, I'm told. And Rebecca, you can take it away.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for joining today. I am Rebecca Cooper, coming to you live from my guest bedroom / my office. And we're going to talk about net sheets today. This is the first time that I've presented this particular course. So please feel free to ask questions, challenge if something doesn't make sense. It'll just help make sure we get you the information you need, but also to improve it for the next time we do it, and then we'll record over this one and make it better. So this is about mastering net sheets, and the subtitle for this course is Know the Numbers to Provide Top-Notch Client Service. So there's an expression, to teach is to learn twice. And as I was saying a few minutes ago, I learned a ton more every time I get into net sheets. I learn stuff and just understand it better. But then second quote, if to teach is to learn twice, I really hope I learned it the first time around. Otherwise, you guys are kind of in trouble today.
That's brilliant.
All right. And Joseph Joubert is a French author from the 1800s, in case you're wondering. All right, so our objectives today is we want to understand not just what they are, but why you should or possibly should not use net sheets with both your buying and listing clients to provide exceptional service. We're going to dive into the various financial elements of both the buyer and the seller net sheets to understand the pieces and parts, and then where to find the information that you need to complete them correctly. We're going to take a look at several examples, and there will be some audience participation, I hope, here. So I'll ask some questions. If you do have a piece of paper or a calculator, something nearby, there will be a few pop quizzes if you care to participate, and just to help practice and drive things home. And then hopefully you're going to walk away with several tools, tips, and resources that will help you be better and more proficient with net sheets, and in order to help your clients and demystify the really complex financials of a real estate transaction. You know, it really goes beyond just your sales price. So, and your buyers and sellers are looking to you to help them understand that. All right, so why net sheets? Why do we want to use net sheets? Again, real estate transactions, extremely complex financial commitment for the buyers, and very important to the sellers how much they're going to get out of it. For the seller net sheets, what we are doing is tallying up the expenses that will offset the sales price, so that we can estimate their net payoff at close, the check they're going to get once they've closed, how much they're going to walk away with. And there's a lot of mystery. Some people just really don't dig the finance, dig the numbers, but there's mystery surrounding how much the seller is going to get by selling. There are lots of costs associated with selling, so it's not just the sales price and they're going to get a check for that, right? So Bobby Noreen, for those who have had the opportunity to learn under her, has says often expectations are always met when they're understood, and so you want to set expectations from the get-go with the seller of how much they're going to get, so they don't get surprised at the end. Buyer net sheets, we're going to add up the various expenses, and it can get quite costly, of the buying process, so that we can both estimate monthly mortgage payment for them and the cash they will need to bring at closing. So monthly mortgage payment is really important. It's not just about, with your buyers, it's not just about how much they can borrow and how much they can afford to buy. It really comes down to that check they're going to have to write every month to satisfy their mortgage debt. And you really need to help buyers understand that it's not just about that price, it's how much they're going to have to pay every month. You're going to help the buyers understand the different factors beyond just the loan amount, and then estimate how much cash the buyers will need at closing so they can set realistic financial goals and expectations. Anybody have any other reasons or ideas of why we use net sheets, why we should use them? And if not, that's okay. You can always raise your hand at any point or just put it in the chat. Okay, so the holy grail of net sheets is the ALTA, right? So everybody knows the ALTA. Some older people who've been in the industry for a while call it the HUD or the settlement statement, but it's, you know, when you get to the closing table, it's a full accounting of credits and debits for sellers and for buyers, right? So that's the final accounting. Well, we can use net sheets to try to get an idea of what that might look like before we go through the whole process, all right? And it's going to help the sellers set the right price, all right? And that's going to be part of the discussion. And then it's going to help the buyers sort of understand what their monthly payment's going to look like and how much they're going to have at closing in order to close. Now, when we say net sheets, especially with regards to sellers, we're not talking about a net listing. We're not talking about the seller says, well, I want to walk away with with $212,000. I want that check to be that. We all know from pre-licensing that net listings are illegal in Tennessee, or not illegal, but they're a violation of our TREC rules and regulations. So we're just talking about, after you take all the expenses out, how much the check is going to be to the seller. Hope that makes sense. Everybody know what a net listing is and that they're bad? So a net listing is if the seller says, I want to walk away with $225,000, but you just set the price at whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to sell it for $270,000. He's going to get, $225,000, and I'm going to pocket the rest as my commission. Obviously, that would be sort of the wrong incentive for setting a price. We wouldn't be setting the price at what's appropriate for the market, but I'd be trying to maximize my commission. So that would be bad.
Does anyone have questions on that? It's a great point and clarification to make sure you understand, because sellers will sometimes do that to you. As long as you get me as long as I walk away with $250, I'm good. However you get me there is great. That's a dangerous spot to be. Even if you could guarantee what you're going to sell the property for, there can be some variables in those numbers that Rebecca's going to go over today. So watch out for that statement from sellers.
All right, so let's take a quick tour of the seller net sheet. Now, this is the Village version of a seller's net sheet, and you can find this, of course, in Transaction Desk under Forms and Village specific forms and the seller's cost sheet. All right, and so I've just pulled it up here so we can take a quickie tour. A couple things to notice. Here's where the sales price goes, and the current loan amount, that's how much they have left on their current loan. And then when we get down to cost, would be the first mortgage would be a loan amount, but what if they have a second mortgage, a HELOC that needs to get paid off or something else? So you need to ask them to provide this information. And before I should have said, before we get into this, the specifics of this, financial information, most of us have been taught and learned from a young age that that's very private, personal information. So before you really dive into this with your clients, you want to make sure that you've provided them a clear outline of what service you're going to provide, and with a focus on confidentiality, and that this information is only being used to help them in this transaction and will not be shared anywhere, and try to help alleviate any stress or worry they have about sharing this information with you, because the usefulness of the net sheets it's only as good as the information that you put in there and if you process it correctly. So you want to make sure you're getting the best information from them. So seller cost, first mortgage, second mortgage, any other encumbrances. Encumbrances in this, there are a couple of different kinds of encumbrance. A mortgage is an encumbrance, right? But when we're talking about a closing net sheet, typically we're talking about involuntary liens, whether it's a tax lien, a construction lien, judgment, there's a judgment for child support or something like that. So, and especially in this area of encumbrances, your seller might be a little reluctant to share that information with them, but be sure you explain what that is. So if they are knowingly not sharing that information, at least they know it should be in there. The policy of title insurance. So we all know the title insurance is what the title company does. They do a search on the title to make sure that the seller can deliver it to the buyer free and clear at closing. All right, so we'll talk about in a little bit how to calculate that. Attorney's closing fees, obviously they deserve to get paid. Rudy Title, it's $450, but if you're working with another company, it could be something else. Proration of property taxes, we're gonna talk about that in just a second on the next slide, actually. So back to the policy of title insurance. Now, a general guideline for how you can calculate that is $5 per $1,000 the sales price plus $100. All right. So in the first example, this is your first opportunity to flex those mad math skills. You've got 300. If the sale price is 364,000, then you've got 364 thousands in there, right? So 364 times $5, and then add $100. That's like the pinch of salt at the end, right? So what would the seller title policy cost estimate be for this one? Anybody?
$19.20.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very good. Awesome. Let's just do one more here. We won't belabor the point too much. So the next one, 525,000 in sales price. So you take 525,000 divided by 1,000 is 525 times $5 plus 100 is anyone? Are you on mute?
2725.
Excellent. Very good. All right. So that's one way to estimate it. All right. Another way that you can do it is to go to Rudy. There are plenty of title expense calculators out there, typically on a title company site. Rudy Title has an excellent one, and we can take a look at it here in a bit. But basically, you just you input some information and it spits out, the amount. Let me see if I can go there real quick, and I'm going to, all right, show all windows. Well, I don't know how to go there, so let's try that.
I just put it in the chat window.
Do you see Rudy Title now?
We do, perfect.
Excellent. So this is rudytitle.com, their title calculator. So you select the county, because obviously there are going to be some fees and taxes that are specific by county, not just by state. So we'll pick Davidson, and let's say the sales price is, what did we say, 525,000. All right, and this is the seller's policy. This is what the seller would pay, so we don't have to put a loan amount in there for this particular example. So seller settlement service fee, that's the title company fee that we talked about a minute ago, the $450. And then the title insurance for the owner's policy would be $2,669. All right. So, and what do we come up? It was like 27 something or something like that. And then some transfer taxes we'll come to in a second. So anyway, this is a very handy thing. If you do Google one and to use it, try to pick one that's local to the property you're facilitating the sale for. So because they're going to have specific information about county and state taxes. All right. All right, let's go back over here. Okay. Okay. Any questions about, any questions about, sorry, push down. Any questions about the policy of title insurance? Okay. All right. Now, when you're working with the sellers, when you represent the listing, at the very bottom of the slide, it says, don't forget the reissue credit. Okay. So if the seller has owned the home for less than 10 years, then many title companies will offer what's called a reissue credit if the seller is paying for the title expenses. And what that means is, okay, seller, you bought the house, 6 years ago. That title search is probably still pretty solid. And if you can provide us that title policy from 6 years ago, we'll cut some of the price off because we can use that search that was already done 6 years ago. And with Rudy Title, the discount is, the reissue credit is 30% of the sales price of the house. So it can be quite substantial if your seller is title and paid for it before, right? So there's some ins and outs of that. You want to address it with your title company, but just be aware if you represent the listing, the seller, talk to a title company about a reissue credit with the title company that they're going to work with, okay? Ted, do you have anything to add on that?
I don't think so. Just when you take a listing, that would be the good time to ask them to find that policy. If they don't have a physical copy, if you can find out who they closed with, they can call that company and get a copy of it.
Right. And this is important. It's not just about knowing the numbers that need to go into a net sheet. This is something that could be of real value to your client, the seller, if they're agreeing to pay for title expenses, and you could save them 30% on what they were going to, have to pay on that. That can be substantial, right? And it can also give you more wiggle room for your negotiation because you understand that the net is going to be this. Well, maybe the seller says, well, you know what, I would, since I'm going to save that, I'm going to give them a little more over here to get what I want. So that's why it's important to understand the numbers and all the options you have so that you can provide the best service for your client. All right. Proration of property taxes. So we know that in Tennessee, you got to pay property taxes, right? And they're paid in arrears in Tennessee. So when we pay our property taxes, when we get our bill, usually in February, something like that, it's for the previous year, right? Remember that one? It's from the previous year. So if you, when a property transaction closes, the seller is responsible for the property taxes for every day from from January 1st through the day of closing. And then the buyer then picks up responsibility starting the day after closing through the end of the year, right? Make sense? So when the bill comes the following February, who's going to be living in the house and who's going to get the bill? That's right, the buyer, right? The buyer is going to get the bill. But hey, wait a minute. I didn't own it the whole time. Aha, that's right. That's why the seller at closing is going to credit the buyer for the property taxes that were owed for the time they owned the house up to and including closing. All right. So to determine a proration of property taxes, you first of all determine the annual property taxes, and the best place I know to look is to go into CRS tax through RealTrax. Anybody have any questions on how to find that? Everybody good with that? Okay. All right, so you go get the number Then you calculate the seller days of ownership, including the day of closing, right? So, and then you take the annual property tax amount, divide by the days in the year, total days in the year, and multiply that by the seller days of ownership that you calculated in step 2. And that's going to be a debit to the seller, a credit to the buyer on the ALTA statement. All right, makes sense? So we'll just do the first one here as an example. So let's say that we're closing on March 9th. That's my mother's birthday. Stuff like that. So, so on March 9th, how many days is the seller going to be responsible for? What are the seller days of ownership going to be for March 9th? So in January, you had how many days? 31, right? In February, you had how many days? Don't say 28. It's a leap year. All right. So 29.
I get it. Tricky.
29 plus 9, right? Because it's including the day of closing. So the seller is assumed to have owned the house for this purpose through day of closing. So that's 31 plus 29 plus 9 is 69, right? 69 days. So let's say that the the property tax amount is $1,000. So we'll take $1,000 divided by how many days in the year? Tricky, 366, because it's a leap year. That's $2.73 a day multiplied by 69. So the prorated amount will be $188.52 that the seller will have to credit to the buyer. So when the buyer gets the tax bill the following February, they'll already have that in their pocket. All right. All right. And now in the next slide, we're looking at the still with the seller net sheet. All right, we've got a prepayment penalty. So sometimes with loans, and the seller will need to provide this information if there's any sort of prepayment penalty that's going to have to come out of their amount. Reconveyance fee, and again, this is specific to the loan that they have. And you can typically find that information on the lender's demand or beneficiary statement. And that's something that the seller is getting monthly from their mortgage company when they get the bill, or they can at least go to the website and download it. And it's got all the specifics of the loan and whether or not there would be a prepayment penalty, reconveyance fee, and then how much is left to be paid off. All right. Then we've got a proration of interest on the existing loan, prepaid interest. We'll come back to that in a second. And you'll get nickel and dime to death on processing fees, notary fees, funding fees, recording fees, miscellaneous fees, fees. Then an FHA or VA loan discount fee if the seller currently has an FHA or a VA loan. Brokerage / additional fees. So brokerage fees, also known as, anybody? The big C.
The big commish.
The commish, that's right. It's your commission. All right. So this would be in your listing agreement with the seller, what those fees are. So let's say in your listing agreement that you agreed to a 5.5% fee, and then you've agreed to give 3% of that to the buyer's agent for cooperation, and then 2.5% to you. You take the total amount of the sale, the total sales price, multiplied by 5.5%, and put that number in here. And if you haven't already had the conversation about the commission and what that goes to and how it's split up, and your seller goes through the roof at this point when they see the number, then tisk, you probably should have had this conversation before now. So, but there's no time like the present to reiterate your value. So when they see that giant number there. All right, then a retainer fee. for this seller, we at Village have our base commission form. So that could be a retainer fee there. And you put whatever you agree to in that. Home protection insurance, also known as a home warranty, right? So if the seller is going to agree to pay for a home warranty, you put that in here. And then repairs, allowances, assessment. Let's say you just make an assumption. The seller has already said, I'm willing to give up to $2,000 in closing expenses, or I already know that I'm going to replace the HVAC, but so I'm not going to do any more repairs than that. So you just give an estimate of how much could be other expenses that is going to go against the seller's net. Health letter, if they have to pay for a septic letter, and then village fund donation. Obviously, this is a village form, and that's a discussion that you can have with your client should you want to, if they want to make any donation, charitable donation out of their closing costs. At this point, they're feeling nickel and dime to death. So, but a great way to present it is, hey, out of every closing, I donate X to the village fund and direct it towards this great organization. And I do that much already. If you want to donate to that as well, I will match that in addition to what I normally do. And so it can make them, feel like, they're doubling their money. Okay. All right. So back to the.
I'll add this in, Rebecca. We're gonna share you some tools as far as there's automated ways to calculate these things, but it's important that you understand how to do this and the principles of that. But I will tell you, there's a predominance of agents do not know how to do this and will not provide this to the seller. And you will stand apart from them because ultimately that's all they care about. It's not even about how much is the house going to sell for, what am I going to walk away with, and how do we get there? And so you'll see sometimes I'll put a summation to this and I'll say, your expenses as a seller average about 7.5%. That is 6% in commissions or brokerage fees and 1.5% in the rest of this junk we're going over today. So that's a simple rule of thumb. If you ever wanted to do quick math with someone, my home's selling for, we think we're estimated it'll sell for 300. I owe 150. We'll take the 300, we'll subtract 7.5%, then we'll subtract the 150 mortgage. There's the quick net. But don't, that's only things that I do on the fly. I always do provide a written net sheet, and this is really important that y'all are going through this. So we use them every client.
And the reason to go through it, as you said, Ted, is not to bore the blazes out of you, but so that you do understand each of these line items, at least what they are. And I can't stress this enough. If you don't understand an aspect of the net sheet, maybe wait to use it until you do, because it's one of those things that you can definitely get off track pretty quickly. And if, in fact, expectations are always met when they're understood, if you set the wrong expectation at the beginning, you're going to have trouble down the road. So
don't hesitate to ask any questions, even if you just want to put them in the chat. If there's any piece of this at any time you don't really understand, we want to cover it, because if you have the question, it's very likely someone watching later will have it too. So.
Right. So now we're just going to zero in a little on that line item 10, which is the proration of interest on the existing loan or prepaid interest. So every month when you make that mortgage payment on the first day of the month, that the interest that you're paying in that payment is for the previous month. All right, for the previous month. So let's say that you close on the 5th day of the month. Well, you were accruing a debt of interest for each of those days up to and including closing. So if you close on the 5th and you're the seller, you're still going to owe interest for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th of the month. All right. So that would go as a debit against the seller, a credit to the lender at closing. All right. So to calculate monthly interest, you take the monthly interest amount, divide by the number of days in the month to come up with the daily rates. Then you calculate the number of days in the current month up to and including closing date, and multiply the daily rate by the number of days calculated in step 2. All right. So that's just to help you understand what that line item is about. And fear not, there are plenty of tools that'll do this calculation for you. But again, you want to make sure that you understand. So when you show this to your seller, you're able to explain it to them as well. All right. All right. And then when you get to the bottom of the seller net sheet, you've got the estimated net to seller. That you put the sales price in there, less the number of this total estimated seller costs here. And that gets you your estimated net to seller. And very important at the bottom of this net sheet, and hopefully at any net sheet you use, is this is for informational purposes only. All right. We're just estimating. This isn't down to the penny what you're going to get. We just want to give you a good ballpark and help you understand what's going to come out, what types of things are going to come out of that check before you get it at close. All right. All right. So with that said, I think we'll skip over and oops, let me go to, where's the stop share? And I'm going to show you just a couple of different options for seller net sheets. And again, there are all sorts of tools that you can find online. I'm a big fan of Excel. All right, so but my background is in finance, and so I used Excel every day, all day for years and years and years. So it works well for me. If you're not as comfortable with Excel, that's fine. There are a lot of these tools that have been developed that are extremely intuitive. You only have to enter information. Some people have turned them into forms. There is a website, an app called NetSheets. And you can subscribe to it, and it's basically you just plug in a few numbers and it spits out the net sheet for you. So you don't have to go this way. But this one we will share with you. We'll upload it to the Google Drive for Village. This one is provided courtesy of our own Zach Goodyear. All right, and this is one that he uses. All right, so in this one, this is a nice one because you can see you can actually have a couple different options there. So if you're in a multiple offer situation, you can just enter a couple different options. Now, all you have to enter in here is you do have to get the annual tax amount. All right, so I'm just going to make it $1,000. Just made that up. And then you put in your sales price. And let's say you've got an offer for $365,000, and you've got an offer for $366,000, and then you've got an offer for $370,000. All right. Then you've got.
This would also work if you didn't have an offer, but let's say the home where you were listing it at $375,000, and you were going to give them options based on what the sales price would be versus what the list price is.
Right, right. So you do need to put in the date you're going to close, right? Because again, it is understood that the seller owns the house up to and including the day of closing. This one's nice. It auto-populates what today's date is with a simple Excel formula. So once you put this number in here, it calculates how many days are left in the year. And we know we're going to need that for things such as the property tax proration, right? For how many days are left in the year. And it automatically does it for you. So the owner's title policy estimate. Now this is based on the same formula that we used calculating before. It's for every $1,000 of sale price, you multiply that by $5 and then add $100, and it's calculating that here. So you can just leave this one well enough alone, and it calculates it for you when you put, let's say I put it, I don't know, $700,000. Boom, it's going to calculate it for you, so you don't have to do the math. But at least you understand how they came to that number. All right. You can also go to the Rudy title calculator, and instead of using this estimate based on that formula, go to Rudy title and get the exact number and put it in here yourself. That's fine as well. Estimated attorney's fees, I put that at $450 because that's the Rudy title cost for transaction for seller and for buyer. Property tax proration. Remember when we put the annual tax amount up here of $1,000? This is going to do the math for you. It's going to take the number of days from January 1 to closing date and calculate how much property tax has accrued up to that point for the seller. All right, so again, you don't have to do the math, but it's good that you understand where it came from. Now, inspection repairs. There's some different rules or ideas, thoughts about this. Remember when we were talking about the miscellaneous expenses and that sort of thing, closing costs, that sort of stuff. Inspection repairs, a general rule of thumb is 1% of the purchase price, but that can vary based on the house. I mean, what if the house is a year old, right? Are you really going to have that many repairs? What if the house is 100 years old, right? But it's just a guideline, but you can put in whatever you want to there. But this particular tool calculates 1% of the sales price. All right, miscellaneous. And again, there's a list of things that could be. Home warranty for the buyers. Is the seller going to pay for a home warranty? You know, if yes, then Home Warranty of America, put $700 in there. Buyer closing costs. Is the seller going to credit the buyer any closing costs? Maybe there's going to be no repairs made, and they're going to credit the buyer $2,000 in closing costs in lieu of repairs. All right. HOA transfer fees, if applicable. Hopefully, if there's an HOA, then and it's been negotiated as part of the contract, if the seller's agreed to pay that transfer fee and hasn't passed that along to the buyer, you want to put that in. And then the brokerage, and this is in this one, Zach has you put here where the brokerage fee, or as he calls it, the success fee is. Again, that's 3%. In this case, it's 3% or 6%. All right, that's going to calculate the commission amount. These are the approximate closing costs, and then it subtracts those from the price we put in up here. And the approximate closing cost is that. All right, so that would be net to seller. All right. Any questions? Does this one look user-friendly? And down here, he's got some other things that you can put, you know, add in there just for notes. And then looky here, he's got the note, the fee listed above are estimates, not guaranteed. All right, so that's one. Let me share another one real quick. Let's go here to this one. All right. This is one that I created to really look a lot like that Village one, right? So I even stole the font, right? So, but I automated it so that it would do the calculations for me. So in this one, you put in your closing date. All right. Put in your sales price. You and the you come down here and put in the loan amounts on the mortgage and the rates. Other encumbrances, we talked about encumbrances. Those would be liens, tax liens, construction liens, whatever. Policy of title insurance. Just like we discussed, there's this formula of $5 per thousand of sales price plus 100. This one will calculate that for you. All right. Simultaneous issue, we didn't mention that, but if you remember what simultaneous issue is for a mere $35 to $50 if you're paying for the owner's title policy. The lender's title policy. You can get the owner's title policy for $35. So, all right. Attorney's closing fees, again, $450 because that's what Rudy title. A proration of property taxes. Somewhere I'm missing property taxes. I'm not sure. I'll come back to why there's an error there. That's my fault. Sorry. Prepayment penalty, if there's any. Reconveyance fee. Lender's demand of beneficiary statement. All right. Proration of interest on first and second loan. Miscellaneous fees. FHA. So these are all the same things that you saw on the Village seller net sheet, but it's an automated, so it'll calculate it for you. You don't have to do any of the calculations. Now, in addition, I did add 2 things to this one because I thought, what are some other expenses that a seller might incur? And I added seller paid closing expenses. So if your seller has agreed to credit the buyer, say $2,000 towards closing expenses. And then also a seller incentive for the buyer's agent. I don't know if anyone's ever seen in the MLS, $2,000, bonus to buyer's agent if we have an accepted offer by July 15th, or whatever. So those are just some additional. Now you could just dump those into this miscellaneous category. But again, just thinking through on behalf of your seller, what are some other things that it could cost them that would impact that check that they get at the end of the day. All right. And then down here, you've got the sales price. And again, I've got an error because of the property tax thing, but I'll fix that. All right. So this one looks a lot like the Village sheet. Zach's doesn't look a lot like the Village sheet, but they function in very much the same way. All right. Any questions? All right. Then we'll go on to back to this. And we'll go through the buyer's estimated cost sheets. All right. So as you go down here, you've got how much down payment they're going to put in. Loan fees. So loan fees are points, right? It's a way for a buyer to buy down their interest rate. And generally, if you, for 1 point, that costs 1% of the total loan value, and it's going to reduce your interest rate by 0.25%, right? So if the purchase price is $300,000, 1 point is going to cost $3,000, right? And it will reduce the interest rate by 0.25 point, all right? Then you've got interest on the new loan, 1 month's interest of prepaid interest. We already know how to calculate interest, finding the daily rate and multiply by the number of days in the month. Attorney's closing fees, $450 if you're at Rudy. Document preparation, buyer's title policy. We'll come back to that in a second. Typically, as we know, in Davidson County, it's fairly common, though not expected, for the seller to pay title expense. Unless it's new construction, then all bets are off. So in this case, it might be $0, or it might only be $35 if they're going to have them pay the simultaneous issue. Now, if the seller's not agreeing to pay title, and it's not as common in Rutherford County, for example, it's common for buyers to pay for the title policy in Rutherford County, then we'll have to calculate this either by calculating it with a formula or by going to, for example, the Rudy title title calculator and getting the cost there. All right. Oops. All right. Transfer taxes. Ugh, that looks yucky. But you can, some calculators, like the one I created, it's got the formula in there. So based on the sales price and the loan amount, it's going to calculate that automatically. You can also, this is great about the Rudy title calculator. There's a section down below the title expenses for transfer taxes. All right, and it'll calculate that for you, which is great. Great thing about transfer taxes, yay for transfer taxes, is that we don't pay sales tax at 9.25% in Davidson County. So it's calculated completely differently. So again, the easiest way to do it is to go to a title company's calculator. But if you want to do an estimate, then you can use this formula. All right, property taxes, the prorations. Property taxes for the buyer side on the buyer sheet, it's not just their proration for the day after closing through the end of the year, right? The flip side of what we calculated for the seller. But the lender's probably going to take 2 full months of impounds as well. All right, so it's not just for the buyer, it's not just the proration for the year, but you're going to have to calculate 2 additional months of impounds as well. All right, the homeowner insurance policy, also known as hazard insurance, right? You can estimate what that's going to be, or the buyer can call their current provider and get a number for that. Insurance impounds, again, the lender is going to take out the 2 to 4 months of insurance impounds as well to make sure that there's plenty of money for them to pay the insurance for the hazard insurance. Then you've got all these fees, credit reports, appraisals, miscellaneous fees. And so you can put those over here. Home protection insurance, that would be the warranty, should the buyer be paying for the home warranty. PMI, we won't get into that too much here, but this is a great opportunity for you to talk to your buyer about the value of a larger down payment if they can, and getting to a point where they don't have to pay private mortgage insurance. All right. And then the retainer fee, that is in the village parlance, the base commission, village fund donation, and termite inspection and report. All right. So again, this is the village form. And then at the bottom of the village form, there's this buyer estimated monthly payment. So again, we're trying to do 2 things, accomplish 2 things for the buyers. We're trying to, 1, figure out how much they have to bring to closing, and 2, calculate or estimate their monthly payment. Because it's one thing to say, oh, the lender approved me for up to $250,000. But it's another thing to say, oh, okay, well, based on all these additional factors, your payment's going to be somewhere around $1,500 a month. And their eyes get really big and say, but I can't afford that, right? So, all right. So now, before I pull up a couple of buyer net sheet calculators, this is the Excel logo. And I'm a confessed, Excel maniac. I love Excel. I think it's great. But a spreadsheet tool such as the ones that we're looking at in Excel or online, it's only as good as the instructions and the data that are put into it. All right. So make sure when you're using a tool that you know what information is supposed to go in there, and that you can explain it, and that you understand how the tool is using that data, and can then translate or demystify or explain to your client. And if you can't explain it, maybe you better not use it until you do. All right. So real quick, just going to look at a couple of buyer net sheets, which again we'll have these available to you. Net sheet. There we go. All right, now this net sheet, I stole it from Teddy Pins and I changed it to resemble an ALTA statement, to sort of follow the flow of the typical ALTA. And so the information that we're going to put in here is same information that we've put in the other tools as well. The sales price, the amount, either the percent or the dollar amount they're going to put for a down payment, and that's going to calculate a loan amount. The type of financing, and I love that Ted had this in his. I didn't have it in mine. Just identifying if it's a conventional or an FHA or a VA, because as we know, there's some expenses that are non-allowables for a VA and an FHA loan that we might have to account for differently than if it's a conventional loan for a buyer, right? All right, then we enter the interest rate. In this one, it's great. We just put in the annual tax amount, again, that we got from CRS tax. And that is going to help fuel and calculate down here. So the first section that we see on an ALTA are the loan charges, all right? Appraisal amount, you put about $550 here, something like that, their underwriting fee. Credit report, I'm seeing those trending at around $75 each these days, but if you've got two people that are going to be on the loan, then they're going to have to run credit reports on both. The cost of points, and again, this is the if you want to buy down your rate, then, oops, I forgot to put the original rate in there. Let's say you had a rate of 3%. If you wanted to pay down 1 point or pay for 1 point, that would reduce your interest rate to 2.75%. All right. Then prepaid interest from the close date. Again, we're talking about the buyer here. So it's the day after close date through the end of the year. Next section you see on an ALTA is in pounds. And again, the property tax in pounds and hazard insurance in pounds. All right. And you can change the number here. It's going to vary by lender, right? So you're not really going to know until, but you can, a good rule of thumb for property tax in pounds is 4 months. And then hazard insurance in pounds of homeowners insurance, generally 3 months. And that's money that the lender is going to hold on to in escrow, right? So that they make sure they've got plenty of money to pay for it while they're toting the note. Next section, title charges and escrow, attorney's closing fees. If you guys don't know that it's $450 for Broody title by now, then I can't help you, sorry. Transaction fee, again, those are fees that are associated with lenders. And as you work more and more with, if you work often with a single lender, you'll get to know what these fees are for them. Loan title policy, this one's fun because it calculates based on whether you're the buyer or the seller. So if you type seller, then it changes numbers. So I like this one. Government fees and transfer taxes. And we talked about the transfer taxes. You can calculate that with that crazy formula that's on the village form, or go to, for example, the Rudy title policy calculator, and it will calculate the transfer taxes for you, and you can plop it in there. All right. Miscellaneous. Again, we're looking at, these are exactly the same, line item expenses that we looked at on all the other ones. It's just rearranged a little bit to see what works best for you. Miscellaneous, the annual premium for the homeowner's hazard insurance, home warranty protection, and that's if the home warranty. In this case, I put that the seller is going to pay for it, so that doesn't cost the buyer anything. But if I put the buyer in there, I know that the one that I like to get for order for buyers is $500, so it'll automatically calculate that. Client retainer fee, that's the base commission. Brokerage fees, that's typically that's coming out of the seller's proceeds. However, if you're working with maybe a FSBO or something like that, then the buyer's going to be responsible for paying your commission, then you need to put that in here. All right, then credits. Sellers and lenders sometimes have incentives and credits, so you could put those in there. And then it will calculate the total amount that the buyer is estimated to need to bring at closing. And let's say that number is $8,000. And closing in theory is going to be 45 days away. And the buyer says, "But wait a minute, I don't have $8,000. Well, better to set the expectation now that, well, based on this current model, this is what you would need to do if we're buying this house and doing this and that and the other. And you need to plan for that. Because what you don't want is to get into a contract and then, a week before closing, you get a final statement from the lender of what's going to underwriting, and it says $8,000 due at closing, and the buyer has no money, right? Because they went out and bought a bunch of furniture or something like that. All right, and in this model, this is great. Again, Ted created this one. This is, you can get information on the interest, a fully amortized loan, and that's going to tell you your total monthly payment for the full loan, including principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, or if you just want to calculate the interest only. All right. So this is a really, really nice one. And again, this one is in Excel as well. It will function in sheets. So we'll have them saved out there and you can download them and start, start playing around with them. Sorry, we're at 3 o'clock. Again, I practiced this, but not a full hour. And I tend to ramble, especially when I'm a little bit nervous. So I do want to show you one more real quick buyer net sheet that, again, we'll make available to you. And I'm gonna share screen and net sheet template. All right. And this one is similar to, this is one that I made as well. And again, I made it to look like the village sheet. So it should look very similar. So if you've gone through on the paper version and filled things out, this one should look very similar in terms of what you enter and where you enter it, but it will calculate for you. It has all the formulas in there. All right. And then at the bottom of this, just like on the village sheet, after you've entered all the information in there, it will calculate the buyer estimated monthly payment, because that does need to be part of your conversation with your buyers so that you're advising them correctly on the amount of house that they may need to, that they may want to consider, so that they're not overextending themselves. All right. Now, again, deemed for informational purposes only. We don't ensure accuracy, but it is our responsibility to advise our clients and to be a source of information for them. If they want specific, absolutely need to know information on lenders' fees and that sort of thing, they need to talk to their lender. If you want to get a pretty accurate pre-ALTA, then you can work with the title company. Ted's got a situation right now where one of his clients, because of a divorce situation, needs to have a pretty good, like really close idea of what the settlement statement is going to look like to the seller as they're working that piece. So that's something that you can provide of value to your selling clients. For example, if they have a reason for needing to know something more accurate, you don't have to go through this. You can, talk to the title company and get them to create one for you with the information that you provide. But I call this one close enough for horseshoes, and it facilitates the conversation that you need to be having with, in this case, your buyer or your seller. It's not just about handing them the sheet and saying, here you go, this is what it's going to look like. It's to facilitate the conversation, not just you telling them about these expenses and credits and debits and that, but explaining to them so that they understand how that's going to impact them the day of closing and after. All right. So with that said, and I know I just talked a lot and I didn't ask any more questions, so sorry about that. We are now at the point where just reviewing our course objectives. Hopefully you understand what net sheets are and why you should or when you should not use them with both buying clients and listing clients, and how that helps you do your job better and set yourself apart. We looked into all the different financial elements of the buyer and seller net sheets to help you understand all the pieces and parts and where to go to find the information in order to complete them. We walked through several examples, including some different net sheet options that we'll make available to you. And then again, hopefully you've gotten some tools or tips or resources that will help you be a master of net sheets. All right. At this point, we can have a class vote. Anybody know Johnny Nash? He was very popular in the 70s. He had 3 songs that I've included here. I can see clearly now. So how do you feel? Would you say I can see clearly now, or there are more questions than answers, or a remake he did of Little Anthony's song Tears on My Pillow. All right. You don't have to vote, and I didn't set that up for good reason. And to finish, a prologue, the Italian proverb of give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish and you feed him for his lifetime. So after this net sheets class, do you feel, does the class say, did she just give us a fish, teach us how to fish, or just to confuse the hell out of us? And with that, I know we went over. I apologize. I do intend to be respectful of your time. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to try to share some information and my love of net sheets. And
Nice work. Lindsay, Kathleen, do you have any questions?
I don't. Thank you. That was really helpful.
So I put a link in the chat to the Google Drive. That is the education drive where you will see many other things besides the net sheet. You'll see class documents and forms and the village directory. And I'm building this, this library as an agent toolkit. You'll see that folder called such. And in there, you'll see a folder called net sheet templates. And that's where we've put Zach's template and the other one, the other template that's built like the village format. And if Rebecca wants to add any more, she can put them in there. But those are the sheets there primarily. They'll get you started and get you rocking.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much. Rebecca, do you want to lead us out in one of your songs? I wanted to hear one of the other ones, even though I feel pretty clear, although I've done this a long time. I haven't heard of one of his other songs, but if you don't have that queued, I can play, I'm going to pause recording.